I'm Dr. Park, and over the past 20 years as a psychologist and a psychology professor, I've helped so many students like you go from all-nighters and breakdowns to handling their midterms and finals like a pro with their sanity intact. Today, I'm giving you 6 practical tips that will help you stay calm, keep your focus, and stay on track during exam season. And if you couldn't tell already, I have kind of a calm, peaceful vibe as well, and people just tell me that alone is really helpful as they learn from me in a live stream like this. So we're going to cover how to break down overwhelming study loads so they actually feel manageable, a calendar system that prevents last-minute panic, and how to reframe stress from something that paralyzes you into something that actually helps you make progress. Because right now, you're probably stressed out of your mind, convinced you're going to fail, and maybe even questioning if college is worth it. So let's change that starting right now. And toward the end of this video, I'll also share with you a suite of free AI tools you can use to implement the tips that I'm going to share with you. And by implement, I mean helping you strategize, helping you study. But first, I want to deliver on my promise to you, which is these 6 tips. So let's dive right in. Tip number 1 is to break your midterms or your finals down into smaller pieces. And the metaphor I like for this is taking boulders and breaking them down into pebbles. Boulders are really hard to move. You're going to avoid them. You're going to procrastinate. You're going to dread them. You're going to freak out and have meltdowns and breakdowns about them. If you can break boulders down into pebbles, pebbles are a lot easier to move, aren't they? And when you move one little pebble, you feel encouraged and you see yourself making progress rather than just trying to shove a boulder and making little to no progress and then getting discouraged. So what this means pragmatically is you're going to take the tasks that you're assigned, and that might be exams, papers, projects, presentations, and you're going to break those down into smaller, more manageable pieces. And there's tons of tools out there that you can use to do this. I like ClickUp as like a task management system. I've also used Any.Do as a to-do system, same thing. And I'm hearing a lot of great things about Notion. Use whatever tool you like, but it should have this functionality of a task and then also subtasks. So the main task is going to be an exam, a paper, a project, or a presentation. Let's say, for example, you have an abnormal psychology final paper. I used to assign those, so let's take that as an example. The task is the abnormal psych final paper, and then the subtasks are things that you need to do in order to complete that paper. So the subtasks might be things like pick a topic for the paper, outline the paper, find journal articles to integrate into the paper, etc. So you're taking those boulders of exams, projects, papers, presentations, breaking them down into small, manageable little pebbles, little pieces. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is to have a calendar system. And to me, this one is kind of Captain Obvious, but there are times where I talk with college students and they're just trying to keep everything in their head. I would recommend that you really do have one calendar system where you're putting everything. And, I know that can be in your learning management system, in your portal, like Canvas, for example. I know that has a calendar in there. I think what's hard about that is that your school stuff will automatically go in there. But if you have like a social event or whatever, something in your personal life, is not necessarily in Canvas. It's not in your LMS portal. So I like using Google Calendar because I can put everything in there regardless of where it is, whether it's work, whether it's a deadline, whether it's travel, whether it's personal stuff. I'm only one whole integrated human. And so I just want one calendar that I can look at. And that's what I would recommend for you. Again, use any tool that you want. It could be Google, it could be iCal, it could be a physical planner. Just try to put everything that is an event or a deadline that is time-bound in one place. So, it could be, again, like any tool you want, but anything that's time-bound in the sense that it's an event where you need to be at a particular place in a particular time that requires your time, presence, and energy, like a class or a meeting. It could be a deadline, like you have a paper due. Those go in your calendar. So that's tip number 2, which is a setup for tip number 3. Block off time in your calendar for when you're actually going to make progress on each of those tasks that we broke down into subtasks. Exams, papers, projects, presentations. I don't want you to go gangbusters on this. Like sometimes I see students who are so stressed, and what they do is they translate that stress into how they're time blocking in their calendar, and they're blocking off these massive chunks of time, like 10 hours or 12 hours, and they just go to extremes out of the intensity that they feel. I want you to resist doing that. Block off 1 hour, block off 2 hours at a time. And each of those is going to have a label on them. So like if I looked at your calendar, it should literally say study for biology exam in a 1 hour block or a 2 hour block. It should say write abnormal psych paper, 1 hour block or a 2 hour block. Create slides for history presentation, 1 hour block or 2 hour block. And in a given day, you can have multiple 1 hour or 2 hour blocks. That's fine. But what I want you to do is take breaks within those blocks of time and small breaks in between those blocks of time as well. So even as you're like in your block of time, when you're studying for your biology exam, I do want you to take little mini breaks within that block of time. I also want you to take breaks between blocks of time. Like if there's a 2 hour study break for biology, a 2 hour block where you're studying for biology, I want you to take a break before you have a next block of 1 hour or 2 hours studying for biology or working on something else. And, within those blocks, you can use something like the Pomodoro technique. People talk about that a lot. But whatever that rhythm looks like for you, I do want you to focus as much as you can within that block of time and take breaks here and there. And if you get to the point of diminishing returns, I want you to stop and step away for a longer break. Diminishing returns is to the point where your brain is so fried, or you just burned your brain. You're so exhausted. You can't think anymore. You're breaking down. You're freaking out, whatever. Stop. Because anything you do past that point is going to be counterproductive. You're going to fall into a vicious cycle of feeling more discouraged and more overwhelmed. And I don't want you to get stuck there. So just stop before you get to that point. Okay. Or as soon as you notice like the red engine light flashing on your internal meter of yourself, I want you to stop and take a longer break, refresh yourself before you come back to working on those papers, projects, exams, presentations. And another thing I also want to share, I know you have so much on your plate from so many different classes. Every professor thinks that theirs is the only class on your plate, right? I know. Switching set makes studying really hard. Switching set means that if you're going to try to go from class A to class B to class C to class D to class E in a given day, your brain has to switch modes that many times. If you can focus on one class or two classes in a day, you're probably going to get further and have a deeper understanding of what you're working on, rather than trying to work on 5 different classes in a given day. And of course, that's going to depend on the time you have available. It's going to depend on your schedule, but try to switch set as little as possible. And by the way, too, I don't want to fail to mention that if you're stressed and if it would help you to have study buddies in this process so you feel less alone while you're trying to focus, please know that I have an online community where college students are supporting each other through stress and anxiety. You can join our study buddy sessions. You can have accountability check-ins with us so you stay consistent, and you can make progress with us from week to week. So if you're interested in that, I'll put the link in the pinned comment below. Okay, tip number 4 is to actually anticipate stress and plan for it. We know already that midterms and finals are going to be a stressful season. We know already that it's going to give you that pit of dread in your stomach, or that your heart is going to be pounding, and that you're going to have a lot of demands placed on you by your classes and by everything else going on in your social life, and perhaps a job as well. What I want you to do, even if you're in the middle of midterms or finals right now, I want you to look at your calendar and I want you to consider what you could subtract from your schedule. I don't want you to treat this like every other week where you always go to this one thing, you always do that one thing. I want you to think of it as an exception, as a special season when you're in midterms or finals week. And I want you to think about what appointments, meetings, or activities you could cancel or you could reschedule. So again, subtract things from your calendar to make room because of this added workload that you have. What could you take a break from, or what could you say no to during these weeks of midterms or finals? And sometimes when I'm having conversations with college students about this, I often hear the language of like, I have to do these things. I need to do these things. Like, I have to do all these things for my sorority, or I need to go to all these club events. And that's really, really harsh, rigid type of language. I want you to try to have a more flexible approach here. And I'm not even saying you have to say, I get to go to, no, I'm not trying to argue that. I'm just saying, massage that a little bit, soften that a little bit. Maybe you don't necessarily have to go to that activity or that appointment or that meeting when you're in midterms, when you're in finals, and you can reconnect, you can reschedule or resume that activity after midterms or finals are over and after you've recovered your brain bandwidth and your energy. And this is a very personal decision. I completely leave this up to you. I mean, some students I talk to are like, I cannot skip yoga when I'm stressed. Yoga class is what helps me to center myself and get through this and de-stress. And I'm like, okay, like, please go to yoga, right? Do that. So you kind of have to know yourself, experiment with this a little bit. Just look at like, what are the negotiables? What are the non-negotiables in your week? So that's tip number 4. Tip number 5, I think I need some, bubbly water break. I'm not sponsored by bubbly water. I just really appreciate them. Okay. Tip number 5 is to reframe stress instead of problematizing it. Stress is not inherently the problem. Stress is profoundly painful. It is profoundly uncomfortable. I hate it just as much as you do. But stress is not the problem. Our capacity to respond to stress is the problem. Stress is a signal that our body is gearing up to do something that is important to us, something that we value. Stress is preparing us to respond to what we perceive as a threat. And in this case, the threat is midterms and finals. And that makes sense, right? Because it's a demanding situation where you're going to be put in a situation where you have to, I mean, for lack of a better word, produce something. I don't like that word, but in an exam setting, you got to like show up and do your thing, right? With a paper, you got to show up, write the paper, turn it in, get a grade. It's inherently an evaluative, performative type of situation. I don't love that either, but that's kind of the nature of the game when it comes to school, right? So that is a threat. We also need to accurately assess that threat. So grades do have real consequences. I'm not saying that they don't matter. However, at the same time, no one is going to die if you get a lower grade on an exam than you were hoping for. Any of us could be hit by a bus tomorrow. I've said that in my previous videos. Like, that was one of the thoughts that a friend said to me when I was stressed about an exam in grad school. And it was like, oh yeah, any of us could be hit by a bus tomorrow. And if that's the case, like, maybe in the grand scheme of my life, this exam doesn't matter as much as it feels like it does in this moment. So another way of saying that is number your days. Time is a resource that we all have as humans. It is passing. None of us wants to think about the fact that we are mortal beings. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we are mortal beings and we have limited time on this earth. So it makes complete sense to me that you're stressed about midterms and finals. I just also want you to keep in mind the grand scheme of your life, and from an existential perspective, an exam is one piece of that, right? A finals week that is super stressful is one aspect of that. It's probably a relatively small aspect when you zoom out and look at the entirety of your whole life. And typically what matters most to people when they really, really dig deep about their life, about what matters to them, is people and relationships. So that was tip number 5 for you. That was reframe stress instead of problematizing it. And here's our 6th tip. Be flexible with your expectations. What are your bigger goals in life? If you have a bigger goal of pursuing a certain job or a certain career, maybe you want to go to grad school, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be an engineer, you want to work for NASA, you want to be a nurse, you want to be a musician, whatever the case may be. None of those or any other vocation that I can name requires absolute perfection. And if anything, as a working person, I can tell you that if you aim for absolute perfection in school and after school, that can actually hinder your progress. That can actually become a liability. So set realistic expectations about what grades you're aiming for in terms of midterms and finals. Set realistic expectations about what grades you want in each class. And the way that I would just boil this down, if I need to say this in like a more hard-hitting way, is if you are aiming for all A's, you're doing it wrong. If you're just waltzing around campus with the assumption that you're supposed to get all A's and a 4.0 or higher, that ain't it. You really gotta reflect for yourself. What are your long-term goals? Where are you trying to go? And in light of that, what would be realistic in terms of the grades you want to get in these classes and the grades you want to get on your midterms or on your finals. So this really is about progress, not perfection. So I had promised to share with you, after those 6 tips, a suite of free AI tools to help you with the implementation of these tips. And the first one is called Goblin Tools. I just learned about Goblin Tools from a professor friend of mine that I was chatting with yesterday. And she said, Goblin Tools is great for students because it can help them take big tasks and break them down into small, manageable pieces, which sounds kind of similar to what we were talking about today, right? They literally have a tool called Magic-To-Do. I went there and I said, I have an abnormal psychology final paper. And then I just clicked the little magic button. It broke that task down into subtasks. So you still need to be a human, right? You still need to look at the subtasks it's giving you and decide what makes sense to you, but it's at least giving you examples of how to break those down into smaller tasks. Then when you sit down for the hours that you've decided to block off time to make progress on your exam or your project, your paper, your presentation, you know what little subtasks you're going to tackle and you know the order that you're going to execute on them. So they have, with Goblin Tools, they have multiple tools there. Check those out. One was Magic-To-Do. There's another one called Estimator that's going to help you estimate how much a certain task would take in terms of time. Obviously different from person to person, but experiment with that, be an observer of your own behavior, see how long it actually takes, and then you're going to use that as information to make even better plans next time. Second suite of tools, actually one tool that I want to share with you is called Jungle AI. You can basically upload slides from a class and it will generate flashcards and multiple choice questions for you in seconds. So again, you still need to be a human because you need to really determine, are these slides accurate for what I know I need to be learning? And also you need to be a human in the sense that you need to consider your study strategies Passive studying, where you're just rereading your slides or rereading your notes, is not as helpful as more active study strategies where you're looking at a flashcard and you have to say the definition of a word. You have to use active recall. You have to pull something out of your brain, have it come out of your mouth, and produce an answer that's more active rather than passively rereading notes, rereading slides. Multiple choice questions can be good for that as well. It's a little more kind of in the middle there, where you're going to see some options, so it's not active recall, but it can still be helpful in terms of studying. So there you go. There's your 6 tips, your suite of AI tools that you can check out. Try those. Let me know what you think. And good luck with your midterms and with your finals, and wishing you the very best.